Well, good morning and thank you for coming out here this morning. Obviously, lighting a bushfire is a shameful, unforgivable, disgraceful act. There's nothing but those words to say about lighting a bushfire. We know that each and every year South Australia Police runs a very comprehensive, thorough operation called Operation Nomad. And this year it's been a very successful operation. I'm here with Superintendent Kim Hand and also dedicated members of Operation Nomad, members of South Australia Police and also the SES Estate Emergency Service. This year, in fact, we've been able to work together with our emergency services personnel and SES has been brought in to assist South Australia Police. We've had 42 volunteers that are actually being paid to help be the eyes and ears of this operation along with South Australia Police. So it's a really fantastic way that they've been able to collaborate. The overwhelming majority of people have done the right thing this bushfire season, but unfortunately there's a small minority that have done the wrong thing. And once again, we've seen a number of persons of interest this operation this year. So this year there's been 90 persons of interest in this operation. And what you'll find is during especially higher bushfire days, it's not uncommon for South Australia Police to go and knock on the doors of these people and have a chat and just make sure that they put them on notice that they're keeping them to account, making sure that they don't get up to any harm. So that's not uncommon for them to do that. And this year they've been assisted by the SES as well. This year we saw, unfortunately, 7 reports or charges, arrests in relation to lighting a bushfire, and we've seen 24 expiations. You might think that sounds like a lot, but it's actually down dramatically from the year before. So I suppose that is a positive thing, that those numbers are down on the year before. The Operation Nomad has run from September and it finishes up at the end of April. In some districts, in fact, the operation has already wound up, but with the likelihood that we might still see some warmer weather later this month, it'll be wound up by the end of April in those remaining districts. So make it very, very clear, lighting a bushfire is a dangerous, a shameful and an unforgivable act. But all in all, South Australia Police and SES have done a fantastic job this year in keeping the community safe during Operation Nomad. And this is run right across the board, but predominantly in higher bushfire prone regions, especially, for example, in the Adelaide Hills as well. So I've touched on some of the figures. As I said, 90 persons of interest this year, and I want to thank the South Australia Police and the SES who've done a fantastic job in keeping the community safe this year. Of course, we haven't had the bushfires like we've had in the 1920 year, but we as a state government, we're continuing to do what we can to invest in this area to keep our community safe. I'll now pass on to Superintendent Kim Hand.
Good morning, everyone. The Operation Nomad, as you're aware, has been running now for more than a couple of decades and continues to be a really good success for us. There was 454 reported fires that were considered under Operation Nomad, of which a low number, about 22, were considered to be deliberately lit, 74 suspicious and 25 not determined. The other 333 were considered non-suspicious. The level of arrests and reports was down this year, but that, as the Minister just advised, was reflective of the lower social activity, but also Operation Nomad is very, very well known by the community. And particularly those that might have proclivity towards lighting fires. Each person that is a person of interest in relation to Operation Nomad has a management plan that's specific to those people. 41 of the 90 persons of interest are considered high risk and obviously get a higher level of attention and monitoring during the course of fire seasons, but generally as well.
Talk to us that there is a line in here. There's around 90 persons of interest that are being monitored by police.
Yep.
Can you talk to us about that? How many people do you believe are in the state at the moment that are capable of lighting a bushfire?
Well, I guess if we've got 90 persons of interest on our list, then that's the answer. These are the people that are of interest to us. And as I said, depending on whether you're considered to be high risk or not, the level of activity during the fire season particularly, and generally across the course of the year, would be expected to be greater, particularly on days of very, very high fire danger.
How are their movements being tracked or their behaviour?
Well, obviously we actually visit these people when necessary, for particularly related to Operation Nomad, and we have other methods of keeping our eyes on people through our own systems.
Weather plays a huge part in this. Is Operation Nomad, this might sound like a silly question, but is Operation Nomad claiming success over the weather?
Certainly not. No, it was. You're right. It was the cooler than average temperatures during the course of the last summer, which I guess is then reflected in the number of fires that we did have, and also as opposed to the year before when they were higher, and we recorded our highest ever single day on record. You would expect the level of activity around the fires to be less than it was. So yes.
We've seen just this last summer there was a huge bushfire, the Cherry Gardens bushfire,
Yep.
and it is believed that it was deliberately lit. Can you give us an update on that investigation and whether or not you've been able to link someone to that?
Well, obviously that matter is before the courts, but the investigation itself is still ongoing, because there was a number of other points of origin in the course of that fire. That part of the investigation is still ongoing.
The Minister reflected on, I guess, how destructive bushfires can be for communities. Can you reflect on it? What does a bushfire, a deliberately lit bushfire, do to a community?
Well, firstly, it puts lives in danger, and that then becomes police lives, the SES and the CFS and the general community. So it has a very, very big impact. And of course, we've seen in other states where these and our own state, these particularly large fires can take years, sometimes decades, to recover from.
The fire danger risk continues until the end of April. We are seeing much cooler weather at the moment. Do you have a message for people about the risk of a fire despite the cooler conditions?
Well, while there's fuel out there to burn, then fires can start. So we ask the community to simply pay attention to the legislation, note that there's changes and some in the legislation during the course of any year, and do their best to be part of the community effort to basically try and return these sorts of results over the course of the fire season.
Just returning to sort of these persons of interest, can you talk to us about the profile of these individuals? What is the sort of behaviour that they're exhibiting that makes you so concerned?
In the main, particularly where there's the high risk people are involved, there's a history of lighting fires or convictions or some form of legal action in relation to lighting fires. It doesn't mean to say a person of interest stays there forever. That there's a reassessment done of all the persons of interest each year, and then they're rated based on that.
How much of a deterrent is being on this list for those people?
Well, I think if you're on the list, particularly in the high risk area, you'd be aware that when there are fires or on extreme fire danger days and beyond that, there's a chance that the police will come and knock on the door and to see where you are and perhaps take other activity to ensure that you're complying.
What are the police resources that are being dedicated to this Cherry Gardens investigation? I mean, how many detectives are on this?
Oh, I don't know the numbers of detectives involved, but it's been actively investigated by the Southern District, and as I said, it's still ongoing.
The 90 persons of interest, how does that compare to previous years? Have more been added to that list?
Well, there was one added just recently over the last days. So it is a living list, it's ongoing. So during the course of any seasons you'll see fluctuations in the numbers. As I said, people don't necessarily stay on there forever, but yes, there's been one added to it recently.
Could the government and the minister behind you provide this operation more resources in any way? Is there enough to catch these firebugs?
Oh, look, I believe that you would have seen this summer with, as the Minister talked about, the partnership between SAPOL and the SES. That's proved really successful, and I think it's just an example of where The emergency services agencies have become a team during the course of the past summer particularly, and you've seen that in a number of areas.
Minister, in regards to the Woodford inquiry, can I just ask you a couple of questions about that? What assurances can you give the community that the recommendations given to your department will be implemented?
Yeah, so obviously we're
Can
treating
you
them
just
very,
answer looking forward, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
so obviously we're treating them very seriously. We welcome the recommendations. Already spoken with the Police Commissioner and also the CE of Correctional Services, so we'll continue to work with those departments to make sure that we can implement as many of those recommendations as possible.
How is it that a repeat offender like Dudley Davey wasn't offered rehabilitation?